This book right here, it's a secret to your progress and success. It's the blueprint and guiding light to your end goals and the direct port to your overall improvement, both mentally and physically. However, just because someone bestows the winning weapon doesn't mean they will win. For that, it requires a degree of precise understanding of why, when, and how to accurately use this successful method. Firstly, allow me to give you a quick backstory and my reasoning for this instruction. I've been training now consistently and accurately for around about 6 to 7 years. Now, I'm very careful with my distinction on words here. This is 6 and 7 years of consistent and accurate training. I trained long before this, but on an extremely loose method in terms. I had no plan, no desired goals. I was just learning new things, playing around with training, enjoying it, and discovering protein powder. These were years I was very young, coming to the end of school. It was important times for my entry into this, but I didn't see it as any firm or long-term interest. However, it's more accurate to state that I actually properly begun, in my opinion, when I fundamentally had a reasoning to go back and start, and had some sort of goal in mind. Even though that goal was, how should I say, finite yet unobtainable, nevertheless, I had a plan. I had set exercises and things were going well, especially considering I was 16 stone of just chilled at this point. I memorized in my head roughly what I had done the previous week, weight-wise and rep-wise, but this was really not accurate or foolproof. But the ideals and the concept of tracking in the early stages were somewhat understood and grasped. Moving forward a year or more, I then decided to purchase a logbook. I made the conscious decision that I will now accurately record my lifts, my sets, my reps in this little book here, which I will refer to every day in order to ensure that I am progressing and attempting to go that little bit further. So over the years and years of me tracking and recording everything, I've come to study and realize that there are potential cracks and shortcomings with this method. If the user of it does not follow and record it correctly, this is exactly what the lesson is going to address. It may appear at a first glimpse and analysis that recording shouldn't require any further tips or instructions for it, but honestly, after doing this for so long myself, carefully coaching and directing others to physically record their training logs, I've noticed glaring holes and failures in this if it is not followed correctly. So let's look at them. I've concluded 5 instructions that are required to be followed and adhered to if the athlete is to fulfill the desired method to its full potential and maximum benefits. So let's have a look at them in no particular order. The first one, full range of motion. ROM. It used to be the kids used to say, oh, cool CD-ROM, man. It's a CD-ROM in the 90s and 2000s. Do you remember that? Now it's, do you even train in full ROM, bro? Okay, so allow me to claim this statement in the most precise and semi-aggressive way. It is not a win if you have to surrender form or range of motion in any way. I repeat, it is not a successful win if you have to sacrifice your form or range of motion in any way. What does that mean? When you're logging your lifts, you first are setting a standard to which you're adhering to, right? Which means, I'll give you an example. Here from my logs, squatting for my first hypertrophy working set around 160 kilo for say 7 to 10 reps. Next week is my aim to get that up to 10 reps. And if successful, I'll move up the weight next week and reset that rep range figure down to 7, 10 or whatever. If in that next week to get that 10, I have to either expose form or the range of motion different from the standard I have initially or previously set, then I cannot count that as a win. Or I cannot count that in any form as an example of my progressive success. The initial set rule of standardization must be met and adhered to. You will not grow from sacrificing your standards. I promise you the opposite effect will happen. I'll give you a personal example of this. Squatting. I eventually got up to 140 kilo in a squat for 78 reps. All half reps, more or less parallel squats. But other weeks I used to get 9, then come back, I used to get 5 again. Why? Because the distance, the range of motion on that movement actually mattered a lot of my actual potential and output and strength. An extra inch lower than I'm used to could cause that weight to feel 20 kilo heavier. And that's just to do when in physics terms point is there's more torque demand as you go lower down. Going that extra bit lower some weeks literally lowered my rep potential by about 60 to 70%. So I had no level of accepted standard on these exercises. I had no considerable leg growth, something I had to change. So I made the hard decision, which is hard for a lizard-brained ego male like me to take, and decided to accurately track and set a standard. I would not count a rep unless it was asked to the floor, and thankfully I had the mobility to do so. Now my legs have made considerable progression and the growth in little over a year. Paying attention to this aspect could be the secret if you're stuck and if you need to get over that slump. I've applied this rule to clients also, and it's allowed them to continue to develop. My brother is a prime example of this. He couldn't deep squat 80 kilo before, then he managed to get to 100 kilo deep squat for 5 reps, but as he creeped up to an impressive 110 to 115, he began to start squatting halfway again, but was continuing to record his logs as if it was just squatting to the normal standardization he set. What happened? He got stuck in a weight eventually and he couldn't progress for weeks. Ending up, we had to pull back his program and put him back down to 90 kilo. Eventually he got over that slump and now he's squatting stronger than ever. That's because now he's adhered to a fundamental preset standardization principle that he has set for himself. Tempo. Okay, so tempo, similar to the first one with range of motion regarding setting a standard for yourself, but tempo of performance certainly deserves a dedication point to itself. Tempo, meaning the speed of which you perform each repetition, how fast your eccentric is, the lowering of the weight, how fast your concentric is, the heightening of the weight, or a more preferred, better way to state is how slow are your reps. I have my preferences to how slow the tempo should be and how it should be performed. If you're under a coach of some sort, I'm sure he or she has specified this, and if not, they should be, because the attention to detail matters a lot. But this again must be standardized throughout. So for example, for myself, so if I've set a tempo structure of say 3-1-2-1, 3 seconds down, 1 second pause, 2 second up, 1 second static squeeze, this again needs to be rigorously adhered to throughout. From the first warm up to the last working set. Even if you're at failure, the speed must not dwindle. Again, this all carries over to accurate tracking, which will lead to measurable progression, which will be successful in your gains and goals. The sequence of your exercises, including warm-ups. Another aspect tend to be overlooked and easily missed. It's the order in which your exercises are performed. What do I mean by this? Well, say it's leg day. Your logbook this week states that last week you performed 7 repetitions on a 100 kilo squat. So this week, perhaps your aim is 8. However, this week, instead of performing your leg extensions or leg press after your initial squats, you perform them first. Because, I don't know, you wanted to spice things up or the equipment was not free. This, if you aren't used to working this way, could lead to the squats becoming a world more difficult than normal. Perhaps when you eventually get to your squats, you're finding it hard to even squat 100 kilo. This doesn't necessarily mean you're weaker this week. It just means you've pre-exhausted your legs on other exercises and you don't have the reserves to perform to your highest potential on this. So make sure it's logged clearly in your logbook, the order of which you've performed your exercises in that day. And that way you can easily go back and review why your strength may have staggered or dwindled on that particular day. This also goes for warming up. Granted, I should have made a separate point for warming up, but your warm-ups are essential, and the amount of warm-ups you do, the reps, the weights increases, etc., can all matter and affect your last working set, or as I like to call it, the meaningful set. While I don't necessarily record my warm-ups, I will record perhaps my last warm-up before my working, see what the weight jump I made on that working set is. But for others, I've set a standard for myself that no matter what the compound I'm on, I'll always start with a bar, then maybe 20 kilo on top of that, then another 10 kilo increase, etc. But you do what you need to do to practice form, grease the joints, and prepare yourself. All of this doesn't just apply to warm-up sets. Also, if your warm-up to exercises include mobility exercises. For example, I do 5 to 10 minutes mobility stuff before legs, to open up my hips, etc., my lower back, etc., to prepare myself. And if I don't, I do see differences in my ability overall to handle heavy loads. So again, make sure the specifics are recorded in your book when you do so. A spotter, this should be a given, but if your schedule permits you perhaps having a spotter some days and others you don't, personally I would log this and specify it beside the exercise. Reason for this, with a spotter you're able to do assisted reps, for example, which should be specifically listed down as assisted when occurred and not as regular reps. But having a spotter also, psychologically speaking, can sometimes make you feel way more confident, way more stronger, performing a little better. Even if the spotter is under you but not touching the bar, it certainly gives a level of increased confidence that some people just don't get from being alone. So I argue that you should specify this when you're being spotted and when you're not being spotted, because in my opinion, it may most likely dictate on how well you perform. Accuracy of recording specifics. Okay, so final one. How accurate are you with recording specifics. This includes almost anything that can potentially, in a small way or large way, affect on how you perform, your energy levels, etc. What can these things include? Sickness, change of timing in the day you trained, food intake, did you consume less or slightly more that day, how are you feeling before training, feeling particularly stronger or weaker that day, if you did a rest pause at the end of your set, that you ensure you wrote that in as a rest pause, not just a normal rep. Footwear, for example, if I forget to wear my squatting shoes, it can really affect my squats, so I would log that if I've forgotten them. Time duration between warm-ups and working sets, where you're chatting more than usual, had you had longer periods of rest, were you quicker that day, maybe that's why you performed better or worse. It can include almost anything that you feel can have negative or positive effects on your progression. If you have any other specific ways to record that perhaps I haven't considered, please let me know down in the comments below so I can add them in my train of thought. And of course, if you like the video, please consider subscribing, as I have other helpful videos over on my channel. But until next time, I'm Card for the Orc Den. Thank you and good night, much love.